The current administration has routinely attempted to police gender, passing laws such as bathroom bills that aim to prohibit trans and gender nonconforming individuals from entering certain restrooms. These transphobic laws, which instigate hate speech and violence towards the trans community, are concealed under the guise of protecting women. The gender essentialism mindset common in many conservative ideologies limits gender to male and female and upholds that there are innate biological differences between the two. This not only marginalizes gender nonconforming individuals, but also impacts women by reinforcing harmful stereotypes about female chastity and moral responsibility, ideas long upheld within purity culture. The Rocky Horror Picture Show, the film adaptation of the musical, first premiered in 1975 and was an instant box office flop, being pulled out of mainstream theaters after only a few weeks. Presumably, this campy sexual musical was too risque for audiences in the 70s. The film follows newly engaged couple Janet Weiss and Brad Majors as they stumble upon Dr. Frankenfurter's castle of pleasure one stormy night and are transformed from a modest conservative couple to becoming one with the freaks of Transylvania. Like all flops turned cult classics, Rocky Horror just had to wait to find its right audience, which it found at midnight screenings at New York's Waverly Theater. Here, the film amassed a large cult following, with many moviegoers returning to see the film week after week. These screenings functioned as a safe space and a place for community, in a time where queer spaces were few and far between. At the screenings, it became custom to dress up, to bring props, and to backtalk during the film, where audience members would throw retorts at dialogue a character says. The Rocky Horror Picture Show is now ingrained in movie culture as a cult classic, and its impact on queer communities cannot be understated. In an age where gender is routinely policed, Rocky Horror stands the test of time as the antithesis to purity culture. One of its central characters, Janet Weiss, is emblematic of sexual liberation for women. At a time where traditional values are upheld and promoted, a pop star using Rocky Horror imagery in a music video is more than just a stylistic choice. Sabrina Carpenters Tears music video embodies this rejection of purity culture through its Rocky Horror influence and Sabrina herself adopting the persona of Janet Weiss. Welcome back to Silver Screen Queens, a deep dive into the portrayal of women on screen. Warning, there may be some spoilers in today's episode, but as with any episode and any movie I discuss, I don't want that to discourage you from watching any film that I talk about here. The Rocky Horror Picture Show was released in 1975. The year Gerald Ford survived his second assassination attempt, the Vietnam War ended, and Sonny and Cher got divorced. Though this film is a parody of low-budget sci-fi and horror movies of the 40s and 50s, and stylistically it could be set in that time, the events in this movie take place in 1974. This becomes apparent when Brad and Janet are driving in the car on that fateful, stormy night, on their way to tell their former science teacher, whose class they met in, that they are engaged. On the radio, we hear Nixon's resignation speech.
What's the matter, Bethany?
There isn't much information online about why this was included in the film, but I always viewed it as establishing Brad and Janet's conservatism prior to meeting Frankenfurter and being in the castle, as well as a slight dig at Nixon himself. During the investigation of Nixon's Watergate scandal, 3,000 hours of recorded audio tapes came to light. In one of these tapes, Nixon expresses his outrage over a 70s sitcom, All in the Family, including a gay character in an episode.
You said, God damn it, I do not think that you glorify on public television homosexuality.
If we look at Rocky Horror as an exaggerated version of the campiness of 40s and 50s B-movies, it also makes sense to look at Frankenfurter as an exaggerated depiction of how queer people were viewed in society at the time, particularly by conservatives. The Rocky Horror Picture Show came out amidst the sexual revolution, a social movement that challenged traditional ideas about sex. It coincided with the second wave of the women's liberation movement as well as the gay rights movement, both of which challenged traditional gender norms. The sexual revolution advocated for matters of consensual sex and relationships to be at the discretion of adults, without interference from the state. This is often known as the free love movement. The sexual revolution also advocated for contraceptives, allowing women to have sex freely without the fear of getting pregnant. This infuriated evangelical Christians, who believed that the dismantling of gender norms and upholding sexual freedom indicated a decline in society, resulting in the responding purity culture, which peaked in the 90s and early 2000s. Purity culture stems from evangelical teachings that delegate when a woman can be sexual, i.e., only within a marriage and to please her husband. We see purity culture alive and well today in tradwife content. Gender essentialism enforces that there are innate biological differences between men and women. This mindset is a pillar of purity culture. This disparages women by creating harmful stereotypes about their values, work ethic, and sexuality. Quote, "Purity culture robs women of their own sexual desires and centers on man's pleasure." End quote. According to purity culture teachings, men are immune from criticism regarding their sexuality. All the blame falls on the woman if he sins, as she is seen as the gatekeeper of his sexuality. Women are both sexualized and desexualized in these teachings, as is convenient to the pleasure of men. A couple months ago, when Sabrina Carpenter announced her 7th studio album, Man's Best Friend, the internet was divided on its thoughts and feelings of the album cover, which featured Sabrina on all fours, having her hair held by a man as if she's on a leash. Many were quick to call her a conservative psyop and criticized her for promoting sexist imagery during a tumultuous political climate, while others saw these critiques as a side effect of the uprise of purity culture in a tradwife-laden digital age. I myself was very neutral about the cover. I didn't find it particularly offensive or shocking. I understood it as an exaggerated depiction of, quote, "men treat women like dogs." But that isn't to say that people who express their disappointment over this album cover are wrong, or that Sabrina is immune from criticism. I'm no mega fan of Sabrina's, though I have enjoyed her tongue-in-cheek pop music that to me lends itself more to camp than anything else. I am also no music critic, so I will not be sitting here and dissecting her entire discography, but I will be dissecting one of her music videos. My credentials are growing up with a dad who showed me all of his favorite music videos, ranging from Peter Gabriel to Missy Elliott. Starting in the 80s with MTV, music videos had a huge impact on how we interacted with artists and their music. Quote, "Ever since the mid-1980s, most musicians seeking a mass audience, millions of albums sold, arena and stadium tours, have been expected to titillate cameras as well as microphones. It became clear that a memorable video presence could elevate a performer from stardom to superstardom. Visuals weren't just for album covers and magazine photo shoots anymore. They became an essential element that could make or break an artist." End quote. With music videos, artists are able to elaborate on or subvert the meaning of a song if done properly. What I found the most interesting about Sabrina Carpenter is the horror elements of her music videos combined with her bubblegum pop lyricism. Prior to her music video for Tears, many of Sabrina's music videos featured death and lots of blood, most notably in Feather and Taste. In Feather, toxic masculinity is criticized as men are plucked off one by one, while in Taste, the death becomes her imagery satirizes the jealousy between women over a man who was just okay. In the lyrics to Tears, it was clear that Sabrina was poking fun at the bar being in hell as it relates to women praising men for doing the bare minimum, with lines like, "Baby, just do the dishes, I'll give you what you want." Before killing her male co-star in the final scene, she says, "It's a thing, someone has to die every video." The man in this music video, like many of Sabrina's other music videos, is disposable. While she is obviously attracted to men, she is expressing her sexual freedom on her own accord, bringing up the point that you can love men and have sex with men and talk about these things while still owning your sexuality as your own. In Sabrina's Tears music video, her sexual freedom isn't discovered by her union with a man. In fact, it is a journey of self-discovery, aided by the eccentric bunch she meets at the house, but not determined by. In this music video, the character that Sabrina plays is a direct reference to Janet Weiss. Modestly dressed Sabrina stumbles upon a house in the middle of the night is met by an eccentric bunch and is transformed into a woman free to express her sexuality. Janet Weiss, played by Susan Sarandon, is the typical conservative, soon-to-be housewife. Upon getting to the castle, Janet and Brad stumble in on the time warp dance, at the sight of which Janet faints repeatedly. Despite her pleas for them to leave, Brad is dead set on finding a phone in this castle of chaos. And that is the dynamic between the two of them at the start of this journey. Brad makes the decisions for them, and Brad speaks for the both of them. But there is a shift in Janet's attitude once her and Brad get to Frankenfurter's laboratory. She is charmed by Frankenfurter, which becomes clear to Brad after Janet claps aggressively following Frankenfurter's speech about creating life. Brad quickly grabs Janet's hands to stop her. In the laboratory, Frankenfurter births the perfect man, Rocky, from a rainbow-tinted glass tank. Here he plays God, and Rocky is his perfectly innocent atom figure. His other creations from the vault have been far less impressive. He parades Rocky over to Brad and Janet to get their opinion on his immaculate creation. Janet remarks that she doesn't like men with too many muscles. As she says this, she looks at Brad adoringly.
Well, I don't like men with too many muscles.
Here she is stating her loyalty to Brad, reaffirming the dynamic of dominant husband and docile, doting wife. But by the time we get to the song, I Can Make You a Man, Janet chimes in with her line, I'm a muscle fan, to which Brad looks at her in horror, causing her to become deflated. Here it becomes clear that perhaps Brad isn't the only man that Janet finds attractive, and she's beginning to express her sexuality openly, and from this point forward will continue to do so. Something has clicked for Janet that hasn't quite clicked for Brad yet. This world of sexual freedom has inspired sexual freedom within herself. On the menu tonight, we are making a mocktail for Janet Weiss. It's going to be a jasmine tea lavender mint mocktail. She's complex. She's slightly sweet, but a little bit bitter. It's a little like aromatic, a little perfumey, but there's something not entirely like, oh, this is so sweet about it. There's a little edge to a jasmine tea, you know? I don't have ice, so yeah, we're not gonna do that. I mean, really, it's just tea, lavender syrup, and mint. Let's give it a sugar rim though. Okay, we're giving it a sugar rim. We're gonna take our jasmine tea. It's not pea, it's jasmine tea that I brewed. Just gonna pour it in there. And then we have some lavender syrup. We'll do a little splash of that. Again, I didn't feel like shaking. Okay, that was more than a splash. It's fine, it's fine. And now we're gonna take a little sprig of mint to garnish it. Oh, that's perfect. Our lavender jasmine tea herb mocktail. Could definitely use lemon, like some lemon juice to make it more like mocktail-y, but I mean, it's delicious. I'm not complaining, it's delicious. In Keith Thomas's article, The Double Standard, he outlines how throughout history, men have been allowed and even encouraged to be sexual beings, while women are told to remain chaste. Quote, the double standard, therefore, was but an aspect of a whole code of social conduct for women, which was in turn based entirely upon their place in society in relation to men. The virtue of women was relative to their function, and their function was to cater to the needs of men. For this task, the first qualification was chastity. Though this article concerns England's history dating back to medieval times and was written in the 50s, we experience the sexual double standard today, mainly as a result of gender essentialism, which enforces the idea that women are just less sexual beings than men. Additionally, many societies throughout history have rationalized men having affairs with prostitutes as a necessary evil in order to allow men to have their sexual freedom and for women to remain chaste. However, if a woman were to have sexual relations outside of her marriage or before her marriage, the the double standard automatically labeled her as damaged goods. Men have historically been afforded sexual freedom while women have been denied it. After Janet and Brad, unbeknownst to each other, both sleep with Frank-N-Furter, Janet runs off in a frenzy looking for anyone who can help her. She's visibly upset at herself for being unfaithful, but quickly realizes Brad has done the same as she discovers footage of him and Frank-N-Furter in bed together. It's easy to assume that this discovery instigated Janet to have sex with Rocky out of spite or revenge, as this scene and her song, Touch Me, follows her revelation of Brad's unfaithfulness. But as we know, Janet was already smitten with Rocky from the outset. During the song, Janet confides in Rocky, confessing that she was a virgin but hours ago and has had a taste of sexual freedom and wants more. If Rocky is representative of Adam, then Janet is Eve, tempting him with her newfound sexuality. The song Touch Me is a declaration of horniness, just like Tears by Sabrina Carpenter. Janet says, touch me, I want to be dirty. And Sabrina says, remembering how to use your phone gets me oh so hot. The antagonist of Rocky Horror is Dr. Frank-N-Furter, a mad scientist a la Dr. Frankenstein, played by the talented Tim Curry. Adorned in a sequin corset, garter belt, and bold red lip, Frank-N-Furter is the epitome of androgyny. Like I mentioned previously, this representation of a character as gender nonconforming was a huge deal in the 70s. But as time has gone on and we've seen more representation of trans and gender nonconforming individuals in film and media, many have questioned if Dr. Frank-N-Furter is a character that we should be praising. Reddit user Kat Smith says in a thread questioning if the movie is transphobic, quote, "In addition to being a sexual predator, he's a murderer and a cannibal, which isn't specifically a stereotype, but sure as hell isn't positive representation." Another user chimes in, quote, "Rocky Horror doesn't perpetuate the tropes, it mocks them. It takes these negative stereotypes about queer, trans people, that we're dangerous predators, emotionally unhinged narcissists, etc., and enacts them in such a ridiculously over-the-top way that you can't help but laugh at the absurdity." Analyzing media from a different time through a modern lens will always bring up questions about representation and motive. It's not a black and white answer to if the representation of Frank-N-Furter is harmful or not, as that is up to individual interpretation. I don't aim to put words in anyone's mouths, as we all have unique, different lived experiences, and it is always valid to have critiques about a work of art. Dr. Frank-N-Furter is depicted as the villain of this movie. He's destructive, territorial, and in a controversial scene, he deceives Brad and Janet by dressing up as their respective partners and tricking them into having sex with him. This has brought up issues of consent and is brought up often in arguments about Frank-N-Furter being negative queer representation. The perceived point of this scene is to show how Frank-N-Furter has opened the doors for Brad and Janet to express their own sexuality. But as we discussed earlier, Janet has already been dipping her toes into expressing her sexuality. The film could have functioned and potentially even benefited from omitting this scene entirely. Though identifying as gender nonconforming, the creator of Rocky Horror Picture Show, Richard O'Brien, has upheld transphobic rhetoric in the past. This non-consensual sex scene and Richard O'Brien's transphobia makes it hard to plead the case that Frank-N-Furter is good representation. And I don't aim to say that I think he is good representation, but I want to offer a thought. Beyond the fact that I think it's okay for a queer character to be the villain in a movie, and that I believe that Frank-N-Furter is villainized in an attempt to mock the ways in which some parts of society viewed queer people in the 70s and even today. I believe Frank-N-Furter is emblematic of a godlike figure. He creates and he destroys. In a 2019 article from author Cale M. Keegan titled "In Praise of the Bad Transgender Object, Rocky Horror," he says, quote, "In the film, Dr. Frank-N-Furter has seized the means of gender production from the hands of the medical industry and has produced his own monster, the ideal white cisgender body of Rocky. In the film, Dr. Frank-N-Furter has seized the means of gender production from the hands of the medical industry and has produced his own monster, the ideal white cisgender body of Rocky. This is a reversal of the classic story of Dr. Frankenstein and his monster, which has often been used to symbolize the relationship of surgeons to transgender people. In Rocky Horror, the transgender creator is granted the power of scientific knowledge, while the cisgender body is reduced to the speechless object of his desire." End quote. Writing a gender nonconforming character as a godlike figure is a direct refusal of conservative teachings that alienate and belittle queer individuals. And more specifically, it's a rejection of purity culture. Like we discussed earlier, purity culture is rooted in evangelical teachings that place God above all and believe that homosexuality is a sin. Rocky Horror Picture Show has the last laugh by saying, "What if God is queer?" The Rocky Horror Picture Show is the film of the counterculture, and its success lies in subverting power dynamics between cis and trans individuals as well as men and women. In writing Janet as the more sexually explorative of the two, Rocky Horror opposes the idea prevalent within purity culture that women are biologically less sexual beings. And in portraying Frankenfurter as creator, as God, who holds all the power over his creation, Rocky, the cisgender body, the movie denounces the core of purity culture teachings that center white cis men, giving them all the power, specifically all the power to make decisions. In the end, Brad and Janet become part of the performance, engage in a pool orgy, and get flung out of the castle, forever changed. They have discovered sexual freedom and now must return to their normal, boring lives. Sabrina Carpenter's Tears music video came out in a time where drag performances are politicized and attacked. Banning drag shows is a thinly veiled attempt to enforce gender essentialism, drawing hard lines between man and woman. The Frankenfurter-esque character in the Tears music video, portrayed by the incomparable Coleman Domingo, is not portrayed as the villain of the story. Instead, he is a confidant, a mentor, a drag mother. The narrative of this music video that Sabrina, i.e. the Janet of the 21st century, has discovered her sexual freedom through the help of a drag queen is powerful imagery amidst politicians trying to ban the art form. And while I think advocating for marginalized communities is kind of the bare minimum an influential pop star can do, I do think it still deserves praise. Rocky Horror lives on as a critique of conservatism and the purity culture that often defines it through its subverting of gender expression and gender norms. Janet Weiss as a figure embodies women's rights to be seen and treated as equal to men, which includes the right to sexual freedom and expression. Thank you for tuning in to Silver Screen Queens, and that's all, folks.